Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm Richard Fields. On the program today we have Gary Clift. You're running for Congress in the 10th Congressional District against John Garamendi, and Gary's campaign manager, Gerald Clift, keeping it in the family. You're the campaign manager for your dad's campaign.
That's right.
You're also going to law school. Where are you going to law school?
Western State University down in Orange County.
Okay, well, my sympathies and good luck, I guess.
Thank you.
Speaking of law, this is not a federal issue. Well, sort of a federal issue. Federal Judge Von Walker ruled a couple of days ago that Proposition 8 in California is unconstitutional, meaning that the law, which was passed by the people of California, saying gays can't marry, doesn't pass constitutional muster. Was he overstepping his bounds as a federal judge in doing so?
As a constitutionalist and as a Republican, I believe so. I believe that law should be a state rights issue, and the voters voted on it. Ultimately, the Supreme Court at this point will probably have to rule, but I think he overstepped his boundaries. But I do appreciate the fact that he did there's a stay on his ruling at this point, I believe. So
yeah.
Nothing's changed, but it's a complicated issue, and but I do think it's ultimately up to the voters of California.
I have a problem with marriage, which is essentially a contract, being regulated by the state at any level, by the state government, local government, or federal government. Because when you're talking about marriage, essentially it's a economic agreement between two people. Usually it's a man and a woman, but it doesn't have to be. We have the state essentially saying this is the legal contract that you will use, with all of the rules that regulate marriage in a given state, and they're different from state to state. Why does the state have to get involved in the whole marriage contract issue at all, other than to enforce a voluntarily arrived at contract? Why not have the only role of the state being to enforce the contract that is freely written by the parties, as opposed to saying this is the contract you got to sign?
I think that I would argue that that's what most of the people want. They want a marriage between a man and a woman. I would support in concept another provision where you could have a contract which would ultimately give a couple the equal rights. But I support the will of the people on this issue, and we can't agree on everything, but I do believe that.
Yeah, certainly a system in which the government was out of it completely, I think, would be ideal, and we should push for. But under the Constitution, is a 10th Amendment issue. The state did decide on it through a vote, and I think the federalists should respect that. Though I personally did vote no on it, I do think that at the end of the day, 10th Amendment needs to be enforced, and when the federal government gets its hands in these things, whether it's health care, marriage, or drugs, it ends up harming everyone because we are unable to see how these different policies would have turned out if we had an example in Florida, example in California, etc.
Perhaps you could have a religious wedding with your church, and you could have a civil union.
Exactly.
Separate thing.
Let the church write the contract if you're so inclined.
It's possible, yes. Yeah. It could be explored. The federal government needs to stay out of it. It's a state issue, and ultimately, hopefully, we can resolve it at the state.
What would we're in a time when Iran is threatening to, they're in the process of actively building nuclear facilities, so supposedly for the generation of powers, but everybody seems to believe they're building the facilities for the use in making nuclear weapons. Israel has said very definitively that that's not going to happen. They're not going to let Iran build nuclear weapons capabilities, and that they will bomb Iran if they proceed on their present course. They've gotten permission, from what we hear, from Saudi Arabia to fly over Saudi airspace in order to make the bombing raids physically possible. Assuming that Israel does make good on its threat, and assuming that Iran doesn't back off, and there does occur a war between Israel and Iran, what should the United States do?
The United States should stay out of it. The United States should, this is between Israel and Iran, and we need to make sure that it doesn't escalate into the areas that we are over there right now, which is a lot of areas. Our troops are overextended. But where's the United Nations? Here we have all this money we pump into the United Nations. Why aren't they trying to resolve this problem instead of all these other issues that they're involved in worldwide? It's, again, one more failure of the United Nations.
Well, obviously, the United Nations is trying to do something.
But how many years have they been trying to resolve this problem? And I don't think the United States has a responsibility to get involved in this war. And Israel is our ally. If they have to defend themselves, so be it.
Would you be in favor then of, in a responsible way, disengaging from Iraq and from Afghanistan?
I would be definitely in favor of bringing the troops home as soon as possible. I am not in favor of stopping the funding while the troops are still there, but we need to have a responsible way to bring the troops back as quickly as possible. I don't believe that either war ultimately is going to end out well. I've said that repeatedly in the campaign. We are involved in cultures and societies that we don't understand. It's very expensive, and our young soldiers are dying. And now we feel like we can't pull out now because we've lost so many people. We're going to continue to lose people, and I don't think there's going to be a good ending to either one of those wars ultimately.
Yeah. In fact, this last month was the deadliest month of the Afghanistan war, and the month before that was the deadliest month of the Afghanistan war. So things aren't getting better. There's not this.
So hostilities are actually escalating.
They're escalating, and it's the longest war in U.S. history now. I mean, it's out of control. We've been unable to solve the problem. We need to cut our losses, bring them back, stop spending all this money. And
it's interesting. We won our war of independence against the biggest empire in the world at the time in a shorter period of time than we've been fighting a third world country in Afghanistan with essentially no natural resources.
That's right. And it's not about being against the military or being anti-military. It's about the military needs to be given a clear job, and they haven't been given the assignment to go and get victory. There's too many rules of engagement, too many complications, and ultimately, who are we trying to support? The people that we are putting into power, on both cases, are not much better than the people that we took out of power.
Of course, the other argument on Vietnam is our military establishment is spending a huge, unfathomable amount of money in Iraq, Afghanistan, not to mention the 100 and some other bases around the world. It's probably the biggest drain that we have that could be fairly easily cut back on federal spending. Another area that we could cut back on is the foray into healthcare that was passed just recently. Nancy Pelosi said, infamously, "Pass the bill so you can find out what's in it, away from the fog of controversy." Well, they passed the bill, and for starters, there are 68 grant programs, 47 new bureaucracies, 29 pilot programs, 2 new entitlements, the individual mandate that you have to buy insurance whether you want to or not, a 3.8% tax on investment income, which is new, and a 40% tax on your healthcare, privately purchased healthcare plan if it's deemed a Cadillac plan, whatever that means. Now, the Missouri voters had a referendum on it recently, and they voted no to the whole thing. They disapprove it by a margin of 3-1. Where do you stand?
I think I've been against it from day one, and hopefully the Supreme Court at some point will also rule that the government is getting too much into our personal life by requiring us to be part of this program. But it's disappointing to me because there is no way that this program is going to be administered cheaply, efficiently, or well by the federal government. It's too big, it's too complicated, and we still have not, very few people have even read all the legislation yet. The bill is it just covers too much, it's too complicated, and there's all kinds of goodies that were added that really don't facilitate better health care.
Like a new tax on gold, for example. I mean, how does that end up in this health care bill? And not to mention the mandate part of it, I think, is just by far a new chapter in American history requiring people to purchase this.
Yeah, speaking of the mandates, full disclosure, I work for Pacific Legal Foundation, my day job, and we have filed suit representing a Army vet from Iowa City who was a medic in Iraq who doesn't want to buy health insurance and as an individual thinks that he should not be forced to buy something by the government. We're using an interstate commerce clause argument to say that the power to regulate interstate commerce is to regulate existing commerce, not to force commerce to occur, which is what this bill does. And who knows where that will go once it gets into the court system, but we believe it has a fairly good chance of success. That's just obviously just one part of a very huge monstrosity. Is there going to be, if you and other folks like you are elected, do you believe there's the capability and the will for Congress to repeal the health care law?
I'm not sure there is the will to repeal it, though I would support repeal of it. I think it needs to be. It's too much. I know that I pay for my son's health care. He's in college. I have to pay for his health care. It's $95 a month. Pretty much, it's pretty much full coverage. There's a substantial deductible if he was to be hospitalized. But that is not an unacceptable amount of money for good health care. We've been very lucky with our health care. Now, I shouldn't say that because it could get worse, but I think there is affordable health care out there, and I think the government involvement is going to make it more expensive. And it's frustrating to me that they can tell the public, they can tell us that it's going to save us money. It's just, and Americans believe that. Oh, the government's going to save money with this. How many billion is it going to save? It's not going to save money. It's going to cost more. You can compare it to Medicare. Medicare is a disaster. The money is not there. 90% of the people I know about it complain about stuff that's not covered and about how expensive it is, about how long they have to wait. How is this going to be better?
The answer is it's probably not, and and you obviously are on board on that. In this last week, well, actually it's been brewing for several months now, a group led by Imam Abdul Rauf has decided they would like to build the Cordoba Center for Islamic Studies, I believe it is, on a plot of land a couple of blocks from Ground Zero in New York City, where the 9/11 terrorist attacks occurred. Understandably, that's raised a hue and cry among people in New York and elsewhere. Should the Ground Zero Mosque be allowed to be constructed?
I think that's a decision for the people who want to build the mosque and the people of New York to make. I don't really see how, as a representative in Congress, I would have any jurisdiction or authority over that. I do think it is somewhat disrespectful to all the people that died and many of the Americans, but I think we're using that as an issue to distract us from all the other important things in this country, like health care. Health care, if we really wanted to have it, let's do it at the state level. The wars. I mean, it's like our politicians are making this is a big issue, the mosque in New York by where the World Trade Center used to be. You know, it's a big issue to a lot of people in New York, but aren't there zoning issues? And how does this get passed if the people in New York don't want it?
How is it an issue at all? Is it not really a controversy or a decision to be made by the owner of that plot of land and the imam?
I would think so.
If the imam buys the land and follows those zoning laws and wants to build a mosque, should that not be basically a non-controversial effort? You know, given the fact that he's probably not going to make himself very popular with the natives of New York in doing so, but he obviously, I mean, I can understand why the people in New York are a bit upset.
It's confrontational, but it's not for the federal government, certainly. And again, the man bought the land. He's supposed to, if he wants to develop it and have a successful mosque there, that's what our law in this land allows. Ultimately, it probably won't be very successful, and then somebody can buy it and make something else there more.
Turn it into a synagogue.
Yes.